The knife gleamed in the afternoon sun as it sliced through blue cotton like butter. Martha Clearwater's dress fell away in ribbons, each cut deliberate, each stroke meant to break more than fabric. She stood in the center of Copper Ridge's main street, trembling not from cold but from the 40 pairs of eyes watching her shame unfold. Thief Sheriff Dawson spat, holding up the silver locket that had started it all. Caught red-handed in Mrs. Henley's parlor, the crowd pressed closer, hungry for spectacle. Martha's dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, her undergarments the only barrier between her and complete exposure. Tears carved clean lines down her dust-stained cheeks, but she didn't speak, couldn't speak. The truth was a luxury she couldn't afford. From the shadows of Garrett's General Store, rancher Cole Bennett watched the scene with granite features. His weathered hands gripped the porch railing until his knuckles went white. He'd ridden into town for supplies, not for this, not to watch a woman be stripped of her dignity in broad daylight. Cole knew Martha by reputation only. She'd arrived in Copper Ridge 3 months ago, quiet as smoke, renting the room above the seamstress shop. No family, no history anyone could verify. In a town where everyone's business was everyone's business, anonymity bred suspicion. Sheriff Dawson raised the knife again, and Martha flinched. The remaining fabric clung to her frame like hope to a dying man. "Please," she whispered. The word barely audible above the crowd's murmur. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough broken things in his 43 years, horses, men, promises, but watching a woman break in public view stirred something primal in his chest, something that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with basic human decency. Mrs. Henley stood at the front of the crowd, her thin lips curved in satisfaction. "Make sure she remembers this shame," she called out. "Maybe next time she'll think twice before taking what isn't hers." The knife moved again, and another piece of Martha's dress hit the dirt. She closed her eyes, swaying slightly, as if preparing to faint rather than endure what came next. Cole stepped down from the porch, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. The crowd was so focused on the spectacle that no one noticed him moving closer, his coat already sliding from his shoulders. But Sheriff Dawson noticed. Their eyes met across the circle of onlookers, and Cole saw something flicker in the lawman's gaze, a warning, maybe even a threat. The knife paused mid-slice, hovering inches from what remained of Martha's modesty. Cole Bennett had never been a man to court trouble, but trouble seemed drawn to him like iron filings to a magnet. As he pushed through the crowd, his coat heavy in his hands, he felt the weight of every stare shifting from Martha to him. "That's enough, Dawson." His voice cut through the afternoon air, steady as bedrock. The sheriff's hand tightened on the knife handle. "This ain't your concern, Bennett. Woman's a thief." "Maybe so." Cole stopped at the edge of the circle, close enough now to see the goose flesh on Martha's arms, the way her whole body shook like a leaf in a storm. "But this ain't justice, this is sport." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henley stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "She stole from me, Mr. Bennett, from my own home while I was at Sunday service. That locket belonged to my dear mother." Cole's eyes found Martha's face. She was looking at him now, her expression unreadable but desperate. Something in her gaze reminded him of a cornered animal, not dangerous, just terrified. "Show me the proof," Cole said. Sheriff Dawson held up the locket, letting it catch the light. "Found it in her room, hidden under her mattress. What more proof you need?" "Her word," Cole replied, and the crowd went dead silent. Martha's lips parted in surprise. In 3 months no one had asked for her side of the story. No one had cared to hear it. She started, her voice barely a whisper, then stronger. "I didn't steal it." Mrs. Henley's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Of course you'd say that. You people always watch yourself, Eleanor." Cole's warning carried the weight of a man who'd spent years breaking wild horses and wilder men. "Finish that sentence, and we'll have words." The older woman's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes blazed with fury. Sheriff Dawson stepped closer to Martha, the knife still in his hand. "Bennett, I'm warning you, walk away." Cole had 2 choices: back down and watch a woman be humiliated for sport, or stand his ground and make an enemy of the law. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the plains, promising rain that might wash away the dust, but not the memory of what happened here. He thought of his ranch 20 miles outside town, the cattle that needed tending, the fence that needed mending, the quiet life he'd built after the war, brick by careful brick. Then he looked at Martha again, and saw something that decided it, not just fear, but a flicker of hope, as if his presence alone had given her the strength to lift her chin slightly, to meet the crowd's stares with something approaching defiance. Cole Bennett stepped into the circle. The crowd held its breath as he approached Martha, his coat extended like an offering. Sheriff Dawson raised the knife, whether in threat or preparation, no one could say. But Cole was done caring about consequences. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the tension like thunder across a clear sky. 3 riders approached from the east, their horses lathered with sweat and dust. The crowd turned as one, momentarily distracted from the spectacle in their midst. Cole recognized the lead rider immediately, Marshal Jake Torino, a man whose reputation for violence preceded him into every town he visited. Behind him rode 2 deputies, both young and eager to prove themselves with iron and blood. Martha's breath caught in her throat. She knew those faces had nightmares about them for the past 3 months. Her trembling intensified, and Cole noticed the change immediately. Well, Marshal Torino drawled as he reined in his horse. His pale eyes swept over the scene, taking in Martha's torn dress, the knife in Dawson's hand, and Cole standing protectively close. Looks like we arrived just in time for the entertainment. Sheriff Dawson straightened, suddenly unsure of his authority. Marshal Torino, didn't expect to see you in Copper Ridge. Following a trail, Torino replied, dismounting with fluid grace. Trail that leads right to that pretty little thing there. He pointed at Martha, and she took an involuntary step backward, directly into Cole's chest. Cole felt her fear like a physical thing, radiating heat through his shirt. Whatever this was about, it was bigger than a stolen locket. Martha Clearwater, Torino continued, savoring the name like fine whiskey. Though I suspect that ain't your real name, is it, darling? The marshal's voice carried across the crowd, and Cole felt Martha stiffen. Her breathing became shallow, rapid. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Torino laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. Course you don't, just like you don't know nothing about the Cartwright bank job in Kansas, or the 3 men who died trying to stop it. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Bank robbery, murder. The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Sheriff Dawson found his voice. You saying she's wanted for murder? Not her directly, Torino admitted, pulling a folded paper from his vest pocket. But she was there. She knows who did it, and she's got something that belongs to my employer. Cole's mind raced. The locket, it wasn't Mrs. Henley's family heirloom. It was evidence, or maybe something more valuable. Ain't that right, Martha? Torino stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his gun butt. You gonna tell these good people what you really took, or do I have to search you myself? Martha's knees buckled, and only Cole's quick reflexes kept her from falling. She clung to his arm like a drowning woman to driftwood. The crowd began to back away, sensing the shift from public humiliation to deadly serious business. This wasn't entertainment anymore, this was survival. Cole made his choice in that moment. As thunder rolled closer, and the first fat raindrops began to fall, he wrapped his coat around Martha's shoulders and faced the marshal directly. Whatever she's done or hasn't done, he said quietly, she's under my protection now. Marshal Torino's smile was sharp as a razor blade. Is that so? The first real drops of rain hit the dusty street as Cole guided Martha toward the covered walkway in front of Garrett's store. The crowd scattered like startled birds, suddenly remembering urgent business elsewhere. Only Sheriff Dawson, Marshal Torino, and his 2 deputies remained. Under the wooden overhang, Martha finally found her voice. You don't understand, she whispered to Cole, her hands clutching his coat closed around her trembling form. They'll kill you just for standing near me. Cole studied her face in the dim light filtering through the storm clouds. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25, with intelligent eyes that had seen too much. There was a faded bruise along her jaw, old enough to be yellow at the edges. "Tell me," he said simply. Martha glanced toward the street where Torino waited with predatory patience. The marshals seemed content to let the rain drive them to shelter, knowing they had nowhere to run. "My name isn't Martha Clearwater," she began, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "It's Sarah McKinnon, and that locket." She reached into the coat's inner pocket and withdrew the silver piece, holding it with reverence. "It belonged to my sister." Cole waited, understanding that some stories needed silence to grow in. "Emma was 17 when they took her," Sarah continued. "The Cartwright gang. She was working at the bank, just a clerk, counting coins and dreaming of getting married." Her voice cracked. "They used her as a shield when the law showed up, shot her when she became inconvenient." The pieces clicked together in Cole's mind. "Torino works for them." Sarah nodded. "The gang scattered after Cartwright died, but they left witnesses. I saw faces, names, and Emma managed to scratch initials into this locket before she died. Evidence that could hang 3 men. Cole understood now why she'd run, why she'd hidden in a place like Copper Ridge, and why she'd rather be thought a thief than reveal the truth. "Mrs. Henley," he asked, "I never stole from her. The locket was mine, Emma's, but when they searched my room, I panicked and said it was hers." Sarah's laugh was bitter, seemed like a smaller sin than the truth. Thunder crashed overhead, and lightning illuminated the street where Torino and his men waited like vultures. The marshal caught Cole's eye and tapped his pocket watch, a gesture that said time was running out. Cole made a decision that surprised them both. He reached into his vest and withdrew a small photograph, a tintype of a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "My wife Rebecca," he said quietly, "died of fever 2 years ago. Sometimes I think about the things I should have done different, the times I should have been braver." Sarah looked at the photograph, then at Cole's weathered face. "Why are you helping me?" "Because everybody deserves someone to stand with them when the wolves come calling." He tucked the photograph away. "And because I think your sister would want someone to fight for what's right." Outside, Marshal Torino's patience was wearing thin. "What do you want to do?" Cole asked. Sarah looked at the locket in her palm, then at the man who'd given her his coat and his protection without asking for anything in return. For the first time in 3 months, she wasn't alone. "I want to finish what Emma started." The rain drummed against the wooden overhang as Cole and Sarah stepped back into the storm. Marshal Torino and his deputies waited in the street, hands hovering near their weapons, confident in their advantage. "Made your decision, Bennett?" Torino called out, his voice cutting through the downpour. Cole nodded toward the sheriff's office. "Let's talk inside, all of us." Sheriff Dawson looked uncertain, caught between local authority and federal jurisdiction. But the rain was coming down harder now, and even corrupt lawmen preferred dry confrontations. Inside the cramped office, kerosene lamps cast dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah sat in the corner chair, Cole's coat still wrapped around her like armor. She'd made her choice, no more running. "I want to make a statement," she announced, her voice steady for the first time that day. "About the Cartwright bank robbery, about the men who killed my sister." Torino's facade cracked slightly. "Now that's interesting. See, the official report says your sister died in Crossfire. Tragic accident. The official report is a lie." Sarah stood pulling the locket from the coat pocket. "Emma scratched initials into this before she died. J.T., Jacob Torino. You held the gun that killed her." The marshal's hand moved toward his weapon, but Cole was faster. His Colt appeared in his grip like magic, trained steady on Torino's chest. "Careful now," Cole warned. "Sheriff Dawson's got witnesses to think about." For a moment the only sound was rain against the windows. Then Sarah began to speak, her voice growing stronger with each word. She told them about the bank robbery, about Emma's murder, about the 3 months she'd spent running from men who wanted her silenced forever. Sheriff Dawson listened with growing unease. Local corruption was one thing, looking the other way for the right price, but murder was different. Murder brought federal attention. "You got any proof besides that locket?" Dawson asked, though his tone suggested he was already choosing sides. Sarah smiled for the first time since Cole had known her. I wrote it all down, every detail, every name, every face, posted copies to 3 different newspapers and the territorial marshal's office before I left Kansas. She met Torino's furious stare. I may die, but the truth won't die with me. Torino's composure finally shattered. You little, he drew his gun, but Cole's shot echoed through the office before the marshal could clear leather. Torino stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, his weapon spinning across the floor. The 2 deputies froze, suddenly realizing they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Sheriff Dawson kicked Torino's gun away and began reaching for his handcuffs. Well, Dawson drawled, reckon I better telegraph the territorial marshal. Sounds like we got ourselves a real mess to sort out. 3 months later, Sarah McKinnon stood in the Copper Ridge Cemetery, placing wildflowers on a small headstone that read simply, Emma McKinnon, beloved sister, justice served. Cole Bennett waited by the cemetery gate, holding the reins of 2 horses. The trial was over. Torino and his surviving associates were bound for territorial prison, and Sarah was finally free to live without looking over her shoulder. Ready? He asked as she approached. Sarah nodded, accepting his help mounting her horse. She wore a new blue dress, the same color as the one that had been cut away that terrible afternoon, but this one she'd chosen herself, had paid for with her own money, earned working at Cole's ranch. As they rode toward the sunset, Sarah touched the silver locket at her throat. Emma's initials were still visible in the metal, but now they stood for something different, not evidence of a crime, but proof that love and justice could survive even the darkest storms. Years later, when their own children asked about the locket, Sarah would tell them the story of their Aunt Emma, who scratched truth into silver and changed the course of history with her final act of courage. And Cole would add, quietly, that sometimes the most important thing a person could do was simply stand up when someone needed them to stand up. In Copper Ridge, they still talked about the day the rancher gave away his coat, and how one act of decency had unraveled a conspiracy that reached from Kansas to the territorial capital. But Cole and Sarah never talked about it at all. They didn't need to.